Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space and baby cards. The Pretty Pink Posh May release just went live. I will have a link to all the new products in the description box below the video. Highly recommend checking them out because Pretty Pink Posh, every release, I'm always just like, it's my favorite. Love it. This one has a lot of baby theme products. There's some like graduation and celebration as well. Like there's kind of a good mix. And the timing was perfect because I actually needed to make a baby card, but I made a couple. And I did some simple watercoloring with Distress Oxide inks, which I've done in a bajillion videos. Love it. I did some stenciling, splattering, of course. So, as always, I will have, like I said, the link to the release below, but I will also have my supply list with links to everything I use. That will also be below. All of my links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I get a little kickback at no extra cost to you. That's what helps pay the bills, keep the channel going, all the things. And then, yeah, stay tuned and I will show you guys how I made these cards. So this is the Pretty Pink Posh Baby Basics stamp set. And I have Distress watercolor paper and my MISTI because I am going to stamp all of the images in this little set onto the Distress watercolor paper with clear embossing ink, and I'm going to white heat emboss them. So I laid out all the images and they all fit just fabulously on this little panel. The only image I didn't use was the stripes for the onesie, but I will actually use that like later. So got everything lined up. I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool since I got everything lined up of like, why not do more than one panel, aka more than one card, you know, while I've got everything out. So anti-static powder just helps keep the embossing powder from clinging to anything other than the stamped image. And then I'm going to ink up and stamp all these images with clear embossing ink and then coat everything with some detail white embossing powder, all of which, as always on video, very boring. You can't see much of what's going on, but the magic starts happening once we actually add color. So I repeated the process on the second panel, and then off camera I ended up actually stamping a few of the images onto just some scraps of Distress watercolor paper. So I had some extras like the onesies and some of the little kind of accessory type images. So once everything was stamped and coated with the embossing powder, I'm going to melt all that with my heat tool till everything is smooth and shiny and fabulous looking, and aka looking like nothing. Looks like nothing on camera. There's no way to make this exciting or interesting. It's white on white. But anyway, after I got everything melted, and then like I said, I did a few more images because this is why I keep all my scraps of all the things. I stamped a few extra ones so that I've got, I wanted a good like little collection of images. And then for the watercoloring, Distress Oxide inks. You can use Distress inks, you can use other water reactive inks, you can use regular watercolors, whatever floats your boat. I just haven't colored with my Oxide inks in a while, and they are fun to watercolor with. They're so creamy, and they just look so nice, and I love it. So I went with a, for me, very non-traditional color combo. I used Fossilized Amber, tea dye, peeled paint, and Salvaged Patina. And I smushed those oxides just onto one of my little plastic palettes. And then I'm using one of my little Ranger Distress watercolor water brush and swirl the brush into the color and paint. It's simple. This is so easy, and because everything's been heat embossed, we got the little bumper pads to keep the color from going where I don't want it. And it also is kind of magical, as you know, the color gets added and you can actually see the detail, and it's like, oh, okay, you know, there's always a method to the madness. So off to the side, off camera, I have a cloth that I just wipe the brush off between colors, and I also use the cloth to like sometimes when there is too much water, because water brushes can be notoriously finicky. This one is still like my go-to favorite. This specific little water brush, I have been using this one, I think it might be a decade or more now that I've had this same one. It is stained to heck. I don't care. It works great, but water brushes are still a little bit finicky, a little harder to control the water in because it's like right in the barrel. And that's why I keep a cloth off to the side. So when there's too much water, just soak it up into the cloth. When I need to change colors, wipe it on the cloth, and then keep going and doing my thing. So I painted everything pretty much the same way. I just kind of mixed up the colors between like what I was painting the onesies and some of the little accessories, things like that. And then once everything was done and dry, this is where I went in with that stripe stamp for the little onesie. And I used the same color of Oxide that I had painted it with, and love it. Love it. How cute is that? I don't know what it is. I really like stripes for like clothing. So it was cute. So I originally wasn't going to stripe like all the little onesies that I ended up watercoloring, but once I started, as usual, I couldn't stop. So I went along and just stamped all of them. And I just used a little acrylic block for that and one of my little foam paw, like Simon foam pads, whatever they're called. I'll have a link to them. That just gives a little more give, so you get a better like stamped impression, and it worked great. So then once everything was done, stamped, colored, etc., I used the coordinating wafer dies, taped them all in place. Yes, you can cut into the magnet. Like I use an Anna Griffin Empress machine. You can cut into the magnet. I don't. The magnets are a little harder to get in Canada. Plus, I just don't like cutting into the magnet. But again, personal preference. But I just prefer to tape my wafer dies into place. Keeps them from shifting when I run it through. So I did all my die cutting, set everything aside, and then I'm working on some A2 panels. And I stuck them to one of my big sticky mats, and I'm using the Layered Baby Wreath stencil set and the same Oxide inks, and I'm using just smaller blending brushes so that I can do multiple colors per stencil and not have to worry about like removing the stencil, cleaning it off, anything like that. So this first stencil, I went in with a bit lighter hand, especially like on those little bear images, because there's layers that get added on top of it. And then the second stencil, exact same thing. I just add the colors where, you know, they needed to be, basically. And then went in with a little heavier hand on parts like the little bear faces, so that the layers of ink will actually show up when I remove the stencil. So worked my way around, and then the third stencil, same thing. The only thing I did differently was I used the green on for the bear's faces, because the green mixed with the tea dye. It just works. It just works. So worked my way around and filled in all these little spaces, and this ended up just being so cute. I love the little, I love all layering stencils, and this one was just adorable. So I repeated the process on a second panel, doing the exact same thing. And then of course I'm going to add splatter. And ended up just using all this ink that was left over on my little palette here from watercoloring, and just had to add a little bit more of that tea dye ink because I'd used up so much of it to color. And then I added just water to each little section there, and I'd put the backgrounds into my splat box, grabbed my trusty little fan brush, and splattered these backgrounds just to give it that extra little texture, you know? Really, there's no like reasoning. If you don't like splatter, don't do it. That's simple, you know. I love it. I like I like that additional, like it kind of fills in, you know, the open areas, things like that, and it's just fun. It's just fun. So added all the colors and all the splatters. And then I'm just gonna set this aside to let everything fully dry, which didn't take very long. And then to kind of frame out my images, I pulled out the Eyelet Circles wafer die set from Pretty Pink Posh, and I used the largest one with vellum. And then the slightly smaller Eyelet Circle, I used some Nina Desert Storm cardstock. And I held that smaller circle in place just to show what's going to get covered up, so I could put adhesive on the vellum one, and then that won't show through because vellum glue shows through vellum. So that's going to be hidden behind the other circle. So I adhered the vellum into place, and then before I adhere anything else, I wrapped some baker's twine around my card front here. And then, as always, reverse tweezers for the win. You start your knot. The reverse tweezers can hold that while I sit and fiddle and zhuzh and get my little bow the way I want it. And then once I'm kind of happy with everything, I can pull it tight, remove the tweezers, pull it tight again, fiddle with it a little bit more, and then trim off the excess. And then once I've got that trimmed off, to adhere the Desert Storm little eyelet circle piece, I'm going to pop this up with just some foam tape. So I'm going to use Simon's Big Mama foam tape just to give it, again, a little bit of dimension. Plus it just makes it lay flat over top of the baker's twine. And then off camera, I had already figured out, sort of like roughly figured out like my layout of all of these little images and whatnot. And I went to town with the dimension. I don't usually use like this much like foam adhesive and like building up tons of dimension. However, it looks so much better when you do. And sometimes it's just fun. So I used varying thickness of foam tape, like some like really thick foam squares and thin foam squares, just to build up like, yeah, different levels of dimension. So the little baby blocks I popped up with thicker foam squares, and then some things I adhered directly to the card front with liquid adhesive. Other things like the little onesie popped up with some thinner foam squares, and just kind of went around and filled in this entire circle with all of those little images that I had heat embossed and watercolored at the beginning. So just kind of tucking them in and around the little blocks. And then off camera, I think I ended up adding like a couple more little elements once everything was done and I could see like what was left over, because I did keep a couple extras for the insides of the cards, which I'll get to in a minute. So got everything adhered into place, repeated the process on the second card front. And then for the insides of the cards, these are going to be top folding A2 white note cards. And I lined up the card bases inside my MISTI, and I'm going to stamp the Hello Little One sentiment from that Baby Basics set. And I'm going to stamp that with the peeled paint Distress Oxide ink. So I'll do that to both of the card bases. And then I'm going to adhere the little images and whatnot that I had for the insides as well, because like I said, I did a bunch of them. I had a little pile. So, because usually when I do like those layering stencils I've shown in other videos, a lot of times I will do that on the insides of the cards as well. But for these, I skipped that because I had plenty. I had extra little onesies and some of the images that I couldn't fit onto the card fronts because, you know, I kind of packed them in there. So I'm going to just adhere all of those little pieces onto the insides of these cards as well. And it just gives them, it's so cute. Like, it's all the cuteness. So adhered the little pieces, and then I'm going to adhere the card fronts to the card base. I totally could have done all that stenciling, etc., directly onto the card base, because I get asked that as well, like why do I adhere it like afterwards when I could have just done it on the card base? It's because if I had done it on the card base, guaranteed I would have got like smears and crud and who knows what on the card base itself. This is just easier. It's just easier. That's the only reason. So once I was done, I dug through my stash. These are like previous release. These are the Mossy green confetti mix. These came out like the fall release, like a year or two ago. I don't even know. There's a link to them though. They're still available. But the green went very nicely with the greens I used on these cards. So I pulled those out and then figured out kind of where I wanted to place them onto the card fronts. And then once I was happy with where I had them, I'm going to adhere the confetti into place with my craft tacky glue, just picking them up with my little embellishment wand, putting down the glue, pressing in the confetti, repeat on the second card. And then once these are adhered, let the glue dry and these cards are complete. So like I mentioned in the intro, I'll have the supply list, links to all the things in the description box below the video. I also highly recommend checking out my blog post, which will be linked directly below. This is part of a blog hop, and there's actually multiple days of blog hops, and today will be day 1 of blog hops. So there's going to be tons of inspiration, all of that. I'll have all that info in my blog post linked directly below the video. So definitely check it out. And yeah, as always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting, letting them robot overlords know you guys like what you see. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.